Hi everybody, I'm Mel Bunny-Cone and I'm Chief Executive Officer of Coast and Vale Community Action. Welcome to the street. This is CAVCA's flagship building providing youth and community facilities for the people of Scarborough. We love hosting events like this here, and as ever, I'm delighted to welcome you to our place. I'm sorry, Dan, I'll keep it here. Don't take it to me. Housekeeping first of all, this is where I do my air hostessing. We're not expecting the fire alarm to sound, so if it does, it is the real thing. Please evacuate calmly and in as orderly a fashion as possible through the fire exit doors and follow the building round to the front car park where the assembly point is adjacent to the cafe, but just a bit away from it because there's a lot of glass could fall on you. You'll find plenty of toilet facilities. We've got more toilets than people, so you'll find plenty of toilet facilities immediately outside the doors and further along the corridor towards reception. Please stretch your legs when you want. If you need a bit of fresh air, move around, that's absolutely fine. So, today is hugely exciting for Coast and Vale Community Action, launching our social enterprise zone and the opportunities that it brings. We hope you will be inspired to stay involved in the zone's development. This zone is a statement of commitment to people and place. It's a statement of pride in our entrepreneurial culture here on the coast, and it creates an opportunity to harness that energy, enthusiasm and optimism for the collective good. I was asked to talk a little bit about CAVCA by David, wherever you are, and how we came to be what we are now, developing new collaborations like this and working to promote a new approach to social action and community resilience. CAVCA has, in one form or another, been around for over 100 years, and we're probably an accidental social enterprise, because it was never planned out in that way. CAVCA has actually been formed of 3 organisations, first merger of Scarborough and Whitby CVSs, and then later the merger with Rydell Voluntary Action. The Scarborough part of the merger started life as Scarborough Council for Social Services, and we were a proper poverty alleviation charity. A committee of the great and the good locally granted funds for essentials like visiting a loved one's grave. We gave cotton knickers to poor ladies. We were fortunate to receive a large legacy which started our property ownership portfolio, and the sale of Allott House, which was the result of Mrs. Allott's legacy, part financed this building that we're standing in today. Whilst we've only recently perhaps called ourselves a social enterprise, we were always socially innovative and socially enterprising. Over the years, we've grown, developed and changed in line with local need. As a CVS, or 3 CVSs pre-merger, our aim was to alleviate the effects of poverty on the local population by providing infrastructure support services and volunteer centres to enable the charity sector to do what it did better. As our operating environment has changed, so has the infrastructure support need changed. Increasingly, we've been delivering services where there's a gap in provision and no suitable organisation around to do it. We've promoted and floated a significant number of organisations, most recently Community Counselling North Yorkshire, Yorkshire Coast Families and Whitby Underground Community Interest Company. We were increasingly receiving inquiries for non-traditional not-for-profit organisations, emerging social enterprises and community businesses, or charitable companies wanting to do something different, and individuals with ideas but nowhere to go with them. So for some years now we've been supporting a new type of social purpose organisation alongside the more traditional charity sector. Our role and purpose was perhaps cemented in 2017 when the voluntary and community sector infrastructure contract was lost to CAVCA, and we commenced a new life, largely independent of local government funding, but with the same mission of enabling communities to thrive. Frightening and yet liberating in equal measure, our role as an independent social purpose body, an honest broker in collaboration and partnership, has been truly sealed, and we hope we will strengthen the voice and independence of our communities moving forward. Our asset base is our main source of income, and we're fortunate to have secured such a substantial asset base. It has to be said, though, that this particular development, this building that we're standing in now, could have broken us as an organisation. It very nearly did, and it was only due to the tenacity of staff and trustees that we ploughed on. And 5 years later, we have only a modest mortgage, a fully occupied building with a range of vibrant activities and tenants, and a sustainable income stream which contributes massively to the overall sustainability of the organisation. and the street just forms one of a range of physical assets owned and managed by Cavco. The latest merger in 2014, which formed Cavco, was created by the merger of Sea Change Community Trust and Rydale Voluntary Action. Too often, organisations consider merger because of questions over their own future viability. We were fortunate in that we were able to merge two strong organisations, one asset-rich and one cash-rich, which set the newly merged organisation in good stead. We were rather stung, as have been many others, by the pension deficit, but this didn't get in the way of our merger. We were brave, we paid off the deficit, signing that cheque was hard, and we've moved forward. We're now in a position where we have a relatively stable £750,000 annual turnover, 27 local staff who are dedicated to their role and to the organisation, some exciting current and future delivery opportunities, and a confident and skilled board of trustees. We're an independent social action organisation, but please don't get me wrong, independence of voice and action, whilst vital to the delivery of our mission, does not mean a disengagement from the state. It's about rebalancing the power to provide equitable foundations for appropriate and purposeful cross-sector collaboration about social challenges and changes needed, putting people and purpose before policy. I'm so very proud to be here today to open the official launch of the Yorkshire Coast Social Enterprise Zone. From Whitby to Bridlington and inland about 30 miles, though with the most loosely, it's my phone, with the most loosely defined boundary that we can get away with, this zone will be an oasis of socially defined and driven activity. Or at least it will be a place where social enterprise is supported and valued, where the contribution of social, local and community-led enterprise is understood, where the usual practice of any business, whether for or not for profit, is committed to the social value principles of local recruitment, local procurement, living wage and social innovation, where the public, private and third sectors work together in collaboration with local people on a shared agenda, co-designing and co-producing efficient, high quality and sustainable solutions to local need. A place where young people can see role models, develop aspirations and see the opportunities available locally, including those they can create for themselves. We know that young people are increasingly looking for three key factors in their future jobs: career, community and cause. This zone can enable all our employers to authentically offer these to their people. We see the zone as the opportunity to start a new conversation. Trading for good on the Yorkshire coast is not just about social enterprise development, or this being a good place to locate your social firm. This is an opportunity for us to formulate a new conversation about the social economy in all embracing terms, about how we can work together to do things differently, creating a resilient local economy that works for local people. It's about the reimagination of public sector service delivery and the role of the voluntary and community sector in that. It's about how business can operate effectively, both serving shareholders' interests and having a strong social motivation, delivering social value locally. It's about harnessing the enthusiasm, optimism and motivation of whichever agency, organisation or individual who comes forward wanting to make a difference. We hope our social enterprise zone status will provide a focus of these new conversations and commitments. I've got one final exciting piece of news for our zone. I'm delighted to be able to announce that Coast and Vale Community Action has been successful in securing, subject to compliance checks, community-led local development funding to employ a full-time social enterprise ambassador for 3 years to support the development of and optimise the impact of the zone on the local social economy. Whilst this post can't cover the entire zone, just the CLLD area of it, it will be embedded into Cavco's core work and we will ensure comparable support is available throughout the zone. We hope to be able to commence recruitment in the very near future. So to end, social enterprise or local enterprise, it really doesn't matter to us. If you're delivering a service or product that's needed locally, you're employing local people and you're contributing to the local economy, that's good enough for us. If you're trading for good, if you want to make a social contribution to your place and your people, then you are part of our zone. This is our unique, bespoke social enterprise place, our zone. Its work will be driven and determined by local people and the local context. We hope it will support and strengthen the conditions required for a vibrant, independent and resilient local economy, and we will build the support infrastructure needed to enable the growth of community-led, community-delivered enterprise for collective good. And we do that because CABCA believes that people and place matter. Thank you. And now I'm really proud to welcome Peter Holbrook from Social Enterprise UK. Thank you.
Thanks, Mel. I'm guessing I don't need the microphone. Can everyone hear me all right? Yeah, I find microphones just a bit tricky. The less technology, the better. So thank you, everybody, for the invitation to be here. It is a real pleasure and a delight to come and visit this beautiful, beautiful part of the country. And thank you for putting on some sunshine for us too. We have this week also been in Salford, and the rain was relentless. So it's nice to come to God's own country and feel the sun on our faces. We've also enjoyed a wonderful day yesterday visiting some fantastic social enterprises. And I would just like to thank Seafood Social. Have you all been to Seafood Social? Seafood Social, yeah? Those of you that haven't, you must go. Absolutely cracking fish and chips, scampi and chips, a wonderful experience that we really, really enjoyed. And then we were fortunate as well, of course, to go to Scarborough and Rydal Community Cycling Scheme, which is in the most unique location that I could have ever hoped to visit, and that's in your old prison, which is an incredible building and a testimony to the quality of building that the Victorians were able to create. And then obviously we went to FutureWorks and we met with Michelle and Sarah and learned about their incredible work with young people who are often falling outside the educational system and their incredibly successful work at trying to build aspiration, hope, a sense of purpose and responsibility amongst young people. And then of course to experience this incredible building too, and to hear about the work that Mel and her team, led by a very, very capable board of trustees, have achieved. And you know, this is kind of my background and my roots. For many, many years I developed a centre similar to this with a range of different services and uses, and understand just how these sorts of facilities can breathe life and a sense of community into places where that sense is so needed. So I'm here to congratulate you on being the 26th Social Enterprise Town City Zone in the UK. You're joining some very, very glorious success stories. Our friends in Plymouth, which became the first social enterprise city, have suggested that the status bestowed upon them has led to £8 million of new investment coming into their community. So this status can act as a real catalyst, and hopefully it can bring together that conversation that Mel was referring to, that can bring the council, the hospital trust, the universities, the FE colleges, the voluntary and community sector, the small business community, and the larger businesses as well located in the zone together to really, really think through the future prospects for the economy within the coastal zone area. So it's lovely to be here. Social enterprises in the UK, some people aren't particularly familiar with the term social enterprise still. After all of our hard work, after 8 years of being the chief exec, some people, including my own parents, say to me, what is a social enterprise? I'm glad to tell you there's over 80,000 in the UK according to the government statistics, and that represents around 7% of all businesses, and they will be in all sorts of organisational forms. Some will be charities, some will be community interest companies, some will be societies, community benefit societies, and some will be incorporated just as traditional small businesses, companies limited by guarantee, and some as companies limited by share. What really makes them what they are as social enterprises is that commitment to put people, communities ahead of the need to generate and maximise profit. And we are seeing a real growth in these businesses. And I'm going to just talk very briefly about the trends we're seeing across the country, to put that into a more national context, and about why we are seeing this kind of boom in social enterprise. So currently about 24 billion to the UK economy, very significant contribution, bigger than the agricultural sector in the UK, for example, and employing over 1 million people. And whether you're working, one of the 28 staff working for CAFCA, or whether you're Bob and Pete running the Scarborough and Rydal Community Cycling Scheme, you're part of that 1 million people that are contributing towards a better society. And just about in every sector that you can imagine, from finance, people trying to take on and displace the likes of Wonga.com by providing cheap finance, affordable finance in communities that are often exploited by high-cost credit, to the likes of furniture recycling, upcycling, people running swimming pools, bowling greens, cycling schemes, community energy, just about everything you can imagine. People making wallets out of old fire hose. I'm even today wearing my special social enterprise underpants, but I don't intend to demonstrate at that point. There are many different types of social enterprise, and they're very diverse in all their forms. Our report, and some of you have got our report, just capture some of the case studies and ideas and data around where the sector is at. And we are seeing a really strong growth. So in the last period that we've conducted research and data, what we can see is that 59% of all social enterprises have grown in the last 12 months. And that's very favourable when you compare it to the private sector, where across the SME community, only 29% of SMEs have actually grown in the last 12 months. So social enterprises are doing something right. They are purposeful, they are very innovative, and they're attracting great talent. They're attracting new forms of social investment to help them grow, and they are finding customers that want to buy from businesses that are creating a fair deal for communities, for staff, for employees and volunteers, for the communities in which they work. There's a slide there that none of you can read, so I'll just skip on, but it basically shows that whether it's in retail, education, childcare, whether it's culture and leisure, there's a real spread of these businesses starting up. So, however, there are still challenges, and if you want to be ambitious and aspirational for social enterprise in your zone, in your area, access to finance is still a major barrier for those that are seeking to grow and develop. Whether that's about taking on a mortgage for a community building or an asset, whether that's just some working capital to help you kind of sustain yourself whilst you're waiting for your invoices to be paid, or whether it's for employing an additional member of staff to help you sell more services and goods. Access to finance is still a major challenge. Thankfully, we've got Matt Smith from the Key Fund here, who holds basically all of the money you'll ever need, and has luckily brought his chequebook with him. Cash in the boot of his car. Which car are you driving?
Only see out.
So, the other really interesting thing about social enterprises is that social entrepreneurs and social enterprises love a challenge. And so we find a really kind of dense proximity of social enterprises in areas that experience multiple deprivation. So the top 20% of areas that are economically struggling attract a disproportionate number of social enterprises. So as you know, community entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, people like Mel, people like myself and others, we are attracted by problems that we think we might be able to solve. And in essence, that drives economic regeneration into the parts of the country and communities where it's needed most. There is this boom, and that's often driven by people that perhaps have retired from mainstream business, or young people that are trying to find their way in the world but want to do business differently. And so 25% of all social enterprises have been born in the last 3 years. So that's an incredible start-up rate of activity. Now, many of them will be micro businesses, and they need that nurturing and support to help them grow, but there is an explosion in the number of people trying to start these types of businesses up. And what's great is, one for the ladies and women in the room, is that 41% of all social enterprises are led by women. If you look at the FTSE 100, it's about 4%. If you look at the SME sector, it's less than 20%. So social enterprise is by no means perfect in terms of diversity and representation, but women do really well in this sector, and thank the Lord for that. And diverse leadership, it's not just about gender, it's also about people with disabilities. It's also about people recovering from mental health issues, or maybe recovering from time spent in prison. Maybe it's about the black and ethnic minority community. What we see is that social enterprises reflect the society in which we live, which is a good thing. And I'm really pleased, this is the figure that that makes me really, really proud to be the CEO of SEUK is that over 78% of social enterprises are paying the living wage to their employees. And the equivalence in the private sector would be certainly less than around 15%. So we are committed to social justice, and we recognise that people that work with us and for us need a decent salary to live and to provide stability for them and their families. And so that commitment to fairness and social justice can be seen right the way through these organisations. Creating opportunities in tough times. 2/3 of social enterprises are supporting people from disadvantaged backgrounds, and nearly 50% are actually employing them directly. And they're very, very commercially resilient, as I say, growing their income in tough times. And increasingly, we're seeing this big shift from delivering services on behalf of councils and local authorities to actually selling directly to members of the public. And we've seen a huge growth in the number of consumer-focused social enterprises, those that are selling stuff in supermarkets, for example. Now, there are many, many great enterprises that have been born over recent times. One of that I wanted to reference is really the Eden Project, and I guess some of you will have visited the Eden Project. Yeah, and it's an incredible social enterprise. It's an incredible social enterprise, not because it's necessarily viewed as a successful business in its own right, although it is. It's seen as successful because it has completely redefined an entire region. It has brought tourism, money, visitors into an area that is one of the most deprived in the country, that's never really recovered from the closure of the mining industry in the southwest. And so this big, big, ambitious social enterprise project, led by Tim, has not only created 600 jobs directly in that community, but it's led to billions and billions and billions of extra spend happening in that region, which has supported, the hospitality industry, restaurants, cafes, B&Bs. And so sometimes we need to be really, really ambitious and not just think about social enterprises running a small community cafe, although they are great too, but sometimes social enterprises can be absolutely kind of game-changing in terms of regional economies too. And of course, we always often think about social enterprise, or I'm often told that people often think about social enterprise as I say, the community cafe, which is all well and good. But actually, social enterprises can compete with the best. So HCT Group started off as Hackney Community Transport, a fleet of small minibuses ferrying people around that needed to get to their doctor's appointment or the supermarket. And today it's a £60 million business, and it competes with First and all of the big commercial operators, Stagecoach, and it wins commercial bus services not only in London, but in places like Hull, just down the road, but also in places like Bristol and Jersey and Guernsey, and it competes and it wins that business to register charity. And it turns all that profit back into social action, training people from disadvantaged backgrounds to become bus mechanics and bus drivers. The average bus driver in London earns £32,000. The average retail worker in London earns £16,000. So by taking someone from a slightly disadvantaged background and allowing and training them to become a bus driver, you can double their salary. And that has a huge impact on things like child poverty. So some really, really exciting developments that have been happening. And then there are those that are also emerging from the public sector. And so we've seen, for example, housing associations, which are social enterprises, that used to, that now run housing stock that previously was managed by local authorities. GLL is the largest independent leisure provider in the country, and it spun out from Greenwich Council in 1993. So it's a few years old. It's now a £320 million business. It was a £120 million business 8 years ago. So it's more than doubled in size in just 10 years. And it simply is this: it's a non-private profit, cooperative social enterprise with charitable exemption. And it runs leisure services that local authorities no longer feel that they are best placed to do so. And it's an incredible organisation, and it puts all of its profits and surpluses into making sure that people from poorer backgrounds, marginalised backgrounds, people with mobility issues get access to sport and leisure facilities. And it runs, for example, the Aquatic Centre in the Olympic Park in London, the Copper Box, and it also runs hundreds and hundreds of facilities really, really well right across the country. And of course, community action, right? And there are now over 100 community pubs. Have you invested in some of these? Many, and that's from a personal perspective, I'm sure. We've saved our pub. You know, how many pubs have we lost in the last decade or so? Thousands and thousands and thousands. What do we do as communities when our post office or our pub or our Lido or swimming pool closes? Do we just accept it? Do we lobby the council and say, fund our local facility over and above your needs to deal with people with multiple disabilities? Can we find new solutions? And actually what we have seen time and time again, whether it's pubs or post offices, or whether it's community shops, or whatever it may be, is that community action, community investment, community shares are revitalising and finding new ways to deliver the things that are most valuable to us in our communities. So there's a massive, massive diversity, and the new kid on the block really is the response to the gig economy. So we know about the insecurity of work, and I'll touch on that in a moment, but the insecurity of work, if you're a young person now, is pretty frightening. You know, flexible work, 0-hour contracts, part-time work, maybe you have a portfolio of 2 or 3 different jobs. You're not sure really whether you can pay your mortgage at the end of the month or how much money you're going to have. And so the response to this is the creation of kind of cooperatives and social enterprises that support those people affected by what we call the gig economy. So that's where social enterprises is finding its market opportunity. But what's really fascinating is, as a conversation that's taking place right around the world, is how do we assess value? Is money enough? Does money make you really happy? And we all know, of course, it can. But we also recognise that money alone does not make us happy. It's no coincidence that actually the richer you are, the more prone you are to mental ill health. You're paranoid that everyone's after your money. You don't trust anyone. Actually, what we're now beginning to realise is we have to think about value in different ways. And what we're looking at is shared value or social value. And creating social value and shared value is about balancing the needs of our communities, our people, with the needs of our economy. So doing well but doing good, finding jobs that actually do give people the security of employment that they so desperately need. And my organisation is very proudly behind and supported the creation of the Social Value Act. And the Social Value Act is having a profound impact. Yesterday, some of my staff were in Birmingham with Andy Street, the Mayor of the West Midlands. And he's got this whole social economy mission looking at how when the local councils, the 7 within the combined authority, spend money, they can do so through a lens of social and environmental value. And it's changing the way we do things. Traditionally, local authorities and parts of the state have only really factored in 2 things: quality and price. But actually, what's the quality of the work for the staff delivering that service? What's the impact on communities? And can we make different decisions based on this notion of social value rather than simply price? And this is all set against the context of the global economic crisis. Now, I don't want to lose you here, so just bear with me. But, the world will never be the same again. We saw kind of the collapse of some of our massive economic systems. It's on the back of the collapse of the economic system and the financial crisis in 2008 that has led to the proliferation of people like Wonga emerging. As banks don't lend on to customers, other higher cost credit agencies have emerged and are fleecing people to the tune of 1,500, 1,800% APR, extracting money from communities where actually there is a role to serve those communities. And so social enterprises that balance the need to make profit, and some people in the room won't like the word profit. I heard you talking about that earlier when I was in the room. People have a tendency to fear profit. There is nothing wrong with profit. We love profit. It's what we do with our profit that defines how we operate and who we are. And actually you can do incredible things with profit. And one of the greatest things I ever did when I ran a social enterprise myself was making my own money, having that money in the safe in our building. And when someone came to me for help, who was a young homeless teenager, and I couldn't get through to children's social services and find accommodation for that person, it was liberating for me to go to the safe, take some money out of the safe that I had earned, and put that person in safe accommodation for 3 nights, whilst I could then go and engage with the council about getting and accessing the right services. Profit should be liberating for those people in the room that are interested in social change. We've got a crisis in public outsourcing, public services, Carillion, Capita, Interserve. We've got some real challenges in the way that public services are delivered, and a lot of people have lost faith in them. And so governments, the current government and the opposition, are looking at the role of social enterprise, mutuals, those that create shared value in the role and the delivery of public services. Because actually they know that the state as a primary delivery agent doesn't always work out, and equally the private sector sometimes puts profit ahead of public service, and that's not good either. So we need these new models, and the new economic model is often referred to as social enterprise. We've got massive challenges. The Time magazine from America is talking about a crisis in capitalism. We've had the top 3 books of last year, all about the crisis in capitalism. We've got the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, everyone saying what's next for capitalism. And what's next for capitalism is social enterprise. Because actually that balance of environmental responsibility, social responsibility and profit can be achieved. And big organisations like the Cooperative Group or Nationwide Building Society have been showing the way for many years, that you can do business, do it well, but do it in a way that actually contributes towards our society rather than extracts it. We've got a number of crises. I'm going to come to a conclusion very soon. You don't have to listen to me for much longer, you'll be glad to know. But we've got a housing crisis, and a housing crisis that is just as prevalent in Yorkshire as it is in places like Manchester and Liverpool. I'm from London, as you might have gathered, and in my home city, the average house price is now £470,000, and the average salary in London is £28,000. So you have to earn 18 times the average salary in order to be able to acquire a home. And actually that's not good enough. At my parents' generation, it was about 3 times. It's 18 times now in London. And even places like Liverpool, where houses are considerably cheaper, you're still looking way beyond what is achievable through a mortgage for most young people. And we have this crisis. And we have a crisis in terms of consumer debt. So this also shows right across the Anglosphere, so America, Canada, all the English-speaking nations, how much more indebted we are as citizens, how big our credit card bills and our debts have become. So we are sustaining ourselves more and more on credit. And unfortunately, 1 in 4 children born into this country are born into poverty. And for the 6th richest country in the world, I, as a citizen, feel that is unacceptable. We have to change things and ensure that our society is working better for those that we bring into it. And I've touched on this, the crisis of work, automation, AI as it's referred to, the gig economy, the nature of flexible, uncertain work, 0-hour contracts, the gig economy, all of these things are creating a situation where there is a great unfair, level of inequity and inequality within our society. And how we tackle these challenges is really down to us. What are the businesses we create and what are the terms and conditions that we choose to employ people upon? Everything's gone crazy in just the last 150 years and it's set to continue. This graph is from the New Scientist and it shows a range of just very different proxies. But what it demonstrates is, since about 1950, we have gone through an incredibly accelerating period of change, and it shows no sign of abating. So this kind of rapid period of change in which we exist is only set to continue. And of course we've got this huge concentration with the likes of Google and Amazon, all these big successful companies concentrating wealth and power in the hands of very few people. You know, there are no national governments that have as much power as Apple. There are no national governments that have as much power as Google. And how do we respond to this? They control a lot of our data. They know more about you than your partners, than your children. And actually, how do we resolve these issues around who knows what about us and who makes money from the behaviours that we display? We've got some big challenges, and actually trying to find these new models that spread power, that share wealth more equally and equitably is a big challenge. And I think this is where social enterprise is constantly being referred to as a big solution for the big challenges of our time. So there are big challenges ahead. I am not one to go out on a pessimistic, miserable, depressing note. I am indeed an optimist. And whether you see me as the monkey or the elephant, I do believe that we are on the brink of something that is very, very exciting. We are seeing young people choose careers based on values, as Mel referenced. We are seeing investors actually say, I don't want to invest in that, that's not good for society, I'm going to put my money over here. We're seeing young people and all sorts of entrepreneurs start businesses that are entirely different, and they're smashing it. And they're smashing it because they're resonating with potential employees and customers and investors. And so this isn't just about a moral imperative to do business better. This is about an opportunity to really, really build businesses that can achieve great community benefit, but also achieve really, really good margins, healthy returns, and a good place in the market in which they operate. Whether you're running a multinational company like Unilever, or whether you're a Nobel Peace Prize winner like Mohammed Yunus, everyone's reaching the same conclusion. So this isn't an argument of the left or the right, this is an argument about how we define our own futures. Even Lawrence D. Fink, the chairman and chief executive officer of BlackRock, one of the largest hedge funds in the world, is also saying the same stuff. And hedge funds aren't known for their general sense of liberalism. They are often seen to be predatory and exploitative, and yet they too recognise that businesses have to change. And as Einstein once said, we can't solve the problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. And this is again the evolution of business into social enterprise. The value of everything, social value, is going to become the new currency of our time. The Social Value Act, put through Parliament by a Conservative Member of Parliament for Leamington and Warwick, Chris White MP, puts that lens of social and environmental impact on all public procurement. And how local authorities and how parts of the state use that is down to them. But there is an opportunity for local authorities to think differently about procurement and put power and opportunity in the hands of local people to really, really step up and take these opportunities and breathe new economic life and opportunity into the communities where we all live and work. There is Chris White with Hazel Blears taking this through. This is a £300 billion opportunity. I listened to the radio this morning, Radio 4, the Today programme, and they were talking about the need to spend another £50 billion on the NHS by 2030. You know, that sounds like an awful lot of money. The government each year spends £300 billion of our money, and how they spend that money, I believe, should be spent through that social and environmental lens, creating good quality jobs, creating environmental sustainability. And Chris White, the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals that we are legally obliged and signed up to. There are businesses all over the world emerging. This is one of my favourites. This is the Greyston Bakery, just outside New York. And I love their slogan. We don't hire people to bake brownies. We bake brownies in order that we can hire people. And that's the kind of spirit of social enterprise in a nutshell. I was mentioning San Padriano in Italy, a community of 2,000 drug users that run an incredibly large farm. They produce 80,000 bottles of delicious wine each year on their farm in Italy. They have taken back control and they are rehabilitating themselves through their social enterprise. There are more products that you can imagine. I've mentioned my wallet. You can also get handbags and purses. I've mentioned my pants. The ladies' version is also available. We've also got baby grows, beer made from waste bread. We've got Divine Chocolate, Cafe Direct, Belly Water, Generosity. The choices are abundant. Whether it's fish and chips, whether it's hiring a facility like this, or hiring a bike from Pete and Rob, you can invest in these businesses by supporting them. And it's not just about products. There are mobile phones, the island of Gia, pubs, buses, community energy schemes, renewables, community assets, old town halls, farmers markets, football clubs. My football club is a social enterprise, AFC Wimbledon. Other social enterprise football clubs, of course, do exist. And right across the world, I was recently in Ethiopia launching Social Enterprise Ethiopia. The entire ambulance service in Ethiopia is run as a social enterprise. And there is plenty of literature to help guide you through this process. There are more books than you could fill a library with about how to take these business models and change your community, change the nature of the world around you. Here's myself and David Cameron. David Cameron's been a big supporter of social enterprise, and Oxfordshire became a social enterprise county whilst he was Prime Minister. We've also got Theresa May, who has launched the Inclusive Economy Partnership, which I sit on, and is talking about the shared society and social enterprise being a key aspect of her vision to build the shared society. And you've got Gordon Brown, who's now become the United Nations Global Envoy for Higher Education, saying education needs social enterprise. Now, there is this consensus that things need to change, and I guess we shouldn't necessarily just look to our political leaders to create that change. The power to create that change actually does sit with us. So when we talk about taking back control, we should think about how we do that in our own communities, not just as a country. Thanks, that's been done. Congratulations.
I'll try. I'm a Yorkshireman, so like my southern colleague, I should be able to project. Thank you. The slides on already, or shall I use my data stick? Yeah, I'll use my stick. Yeah, no problem. Sorry, apologies. I will be.
While Matt's sorting out his data stick, does anyone have any questions? You can disagree with anything that I said. Tell me that I'm talking nonsense if you like. Any thoughts, reflections? You're very quiet for a Yorkshire crowd.
I've got one for you.
Okay, what's that?
I'm sure you do actually. What are you going to do about 22% of social enterprises who don't pay living wage?
It's a good question. So one of the big issues, just before you go to the toilet, or I can wait until you come back, is often those of you that deliver contracts from local authorities. Anyone delivering a contract on behalf of a local authority? One. So one of the challenges, when we go and talk to people about why they don't, it's because they are delivering a contract on behalf of a local authority and they've had to bid competitively and they are judged against price. And the contract value simply does not give them the resource capacity to up their salaries up to the living wage. So one of the challenges we've set out to government and to local authorities all around the country is that when you commission services, whether it's refuse collection or services for older people, you must stipulate within your contract tenders and specifications that people must pay the living wage. That's what will lift the tide for everybody.
I think that's part of the social value.
Absolutely, they can do that. So there are councils around the country that have done that. We're talking to Andy Street in the West Midlands about doing that. We've seen Camden, we've seen a number of local authorities, Croydon have done that. So there are ways in which, in conversation with universities, housing associations and local authorities and CCGs, that you can, kind of build that expectation that this is for the benefit of everybody in the community if we pay fair wages for people. And actually they need to put that specification into their contract tenders so that when you're bidding, you're not putting yourself in an uncompetitive place by increasing your costs against your competitors. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. So always good to have a film. Thank you for having me along. A fairly short drive for me from Doncaster, so always nice to be out here on the coast. I'm going to talk through some kind of high-level thoughts that I guess build on Peter's discussion really around how you grow trade and how social enterprises emerge. Not surprisingly, there'll be a bit of a finance slant, but then I'm going to go a slightly different way with what I'm talking about. Briefly, I've been at Keith for 16 years. I was a young idealistic person when I started. I'm slightly older and certainly greyer now, but I don't think that's to do with social enterprise. But I am clearly, everything that Pete says I absolutely agree with, and I think now is the time for us to make a real change in the number of social enterprises that are out there. I'm going to talk briefly about key funds. I'm not going to talk too much because I hate doing infomercials, but I guess it gives context to what I'm going to talk about afterwards. So that's our mission. A theme I'll keep coming back to is right kind of money at the right time, because it's really important. It isn't just any money, it's about making sure that it enables you to do the things that you want to achieve. We're all about community and social enterprise, and we're all about the people that cannot get money from elsewhere, and that's what drives us as an organisation. What does that look like in practice? Well, we have been around since 1999, so we're a fairly mature organisation, one of the first social investors in the country, developed really in South Yorkshire as a reaction to the demise of major industry, so another seismic change to UK PLC, to the world as we knew it, the demise of coal and steel in particular, and the huge profound impacts that had on communities. Communities like, I'm going to talk about a case study later on, but communities like Grindthorpe, where the sole reason for that community was the pit. Those that have seen Brastoff will have seen, a pretty good indication of what that did to people and to communities. And that was really Key Fund was born against that, to say, how can we stop these communities falling further? How do we help people to help themselves? And I guess driven by a profound belief that actually the solutions are within the communities themselves, that governments, that local authorities coming in and trying to do things to people doesn't work. You have to engage people in that change themselves. And that really drives the way in which we work today, and I think a lot of social investors are working that way as well. There's some headline stats, I don't intend to talk through those too much. I think the one that I'm most proud of as a CEO, there's two really. One is 57% of our investments are into the top 30% most deprived communities. And when I say into, I mean organisations that exist within those communities. 95% of our investees work in those communities, but they're actually based in there. So the buildings there, the people who work there come from those communities. And for me, that's what we are all about as an organisation. And the other one is about the total impact that we've had. We're a social enterprise, we're not for profit, we invest everything that comes back. And as Peter said, I think that number there shows how much impact social enterprises have. So for the 50 million we've invested, we've actually enabled 196 million of direct impact in those communities. So a real leverage effect that happens very, very quickly from that work. And the other point is the majority are all small organisations on the whole. We don't unfortunately see too many GLTs or HCTs. Most of our investees are looking for sums under 50,000. Our average deal is between 30 and 40. So real grassroots organisations trying to make local impact. I talked about right money, right time. What do I mean? This really complicated chart is I guess what I mean, and I'll try and talk you through this. But what we have is we've got a vertical and a horizontal axis. On the horizontal, we've got the stage of business growth, which I'm sure you'll all understand. We've got startup, we've got early stage growth, we've then got the main growth period, and then we've got a point at which businesses become established. On the vertical, we've got restricted grant, equity, secured loans and loans, which are the kinds of money that you can get basically. That's the general gist of what you can get. And the box in the middle are where those bits of the types of organisations and the types of funds that will help you in those phases. So Key Fund sits somewhere about here, because we're a bit of an oddball and do a bit of everything. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is you have to think about what you're trying to achieve and where you are in your growth before you think about the kind of money. So, if you came to Key Fund and you were a established organisation and you were buying a building, what we're going to do is send you to another investor, because actually our short-term, low-scale money isn't going to work for you. If you are that kind of organisation, you should be going to a social bank, and you should be going to them because you'll get it cheap, and actually they'll give you long-term money. You've got an asset, it's going to appreciate hopefully over time, so you raise long-term money. Conversely, if you are a startup and you have no income and you are looking to start something very, very new, then it wouldn't be appropriate for us to lend you money if you don't know where your revenue stream is coming from. What we actually need to do is to try and find a grant program, to try and help you to access that money, to try something new. So thinking about what you're trying to achieve, where the structure is, and where you're trying to move forward, I think is really important. The right money at the right time is really key. We could invest all of our cash tomorrow against need, because there is so much need across the whole area. We could probably do it in South Yorkshire, we could probably even do it in Sheffield where our office is. But the reality is that we'd be doing a disservice to people. We'd put people out of business tomorrow, because if you can't repay, then you go out of business. So it becomes really, really important. The really interesting thing that I think is growing and has more and more potential for people to think about is that orange piece that kind of runs through the middle of this, crowdfunding. We are increasingly seeing more and more people using crowdfunding in really interesting ways, alongside other bits of finance, to develop social enterprise activity. And people tend to think about crowdfunding as a way of bringing in either free money, if they come from a certain perspective, or repayable money. But actually, it can be both, and it can be all things at the same time. So, Peter mentioned community pubs. We have probably about 20 at the moment in our portfolio. I was trying to get a strip across the north, so I could do a coast-to-coast, pub-to-pub that we'd invested in. Not quite there yet. I need one over this side a little bit. So if anyone's interested, do talk to me, because that's my aspiration. But what we see with those organisations is a part of the mix is about bringing in local money. And I think it's really interesting because it does a couple of things. One is, if you go to an investor and you say, I've got this business model, I don't have customers yet because I haven't opened, but actually I've got 200 people who've actually put money behind me, that suggests that actually you've got people who believe in you, you've got a market that are probably going to buy stuff from you. So that makes the investment decision much easier. The other thing is that those people are double baked into your business, because they're not just customers potentially, they're shareholders. So if they're going to choose, they're likely to come to you first. They're likely to buy from you as a first point. So I think thinking about trying to mobilise the local capital, even if it's only very little amounts, can have a massive impact on all of this. So lining up the right money with some local money is really important. And I'm going to touch on something related to that a little bit further along. I need notice I'm not quite as eloquent as Peter and rehearse. What does it mean in reality? The fact is that this kind of modelling is something that you all do, and it's something that we try to do as an organisation. But it becomes very difficult sometimes with the amounts that are involved. So just to give you an understanding of where the social investment market is, so if we take social investment funds kind of upwards, year before last, in 2016, there were £585 million of offers made by all the social investors, according to our wholesale funder, Big Society Capital. So the average deal offered was £731,000, which is a big amount of money. If I managed to pull £731,000 Keith, I'd be really happy. That's a nice big amount for us. So it gives you some indication actually of where social investment is. Now, I run a social investment fund. I believe very deeply in what we do, but it shows that sometimes the scale of the money doesn't necessarily represent, I think, where I think, and you could tell me I'm wrong, and I hope you all have massive aspirational plans like the Eden Project, but actually there's a huge mismatch between the kind of money that's out there being offered and the need that's actually there. We try and fill that a little bit, but it suggests that actually there's something that isn't quite working, which is why thinking outside of the general easy solutions is actually something that's really important. So, I've said it's not all about the money. So, just a quick question. So I've a very specific experience in Keitham, but there's a kind of wider data set of business failures. Why do people think that businesses fail? What do you think is the biggest reason? The biggest single reason? Cash flow. Cash flow. So money? Yeah? Not a bad guess. That's actually second. It's about 29% failed because they haven't got the cash that they need. The biggest reason that businesses fail, 42%, is because they can't find customers. So, or the market changes. So it's all about the market, which is a fairly interesting figure when you think about all that money's been orientated towards trying to make it work. So, why don't they find the market? I think there's a few reasons that I've sort of experienced. Some of these are not relevant to some, but I think something that repeats again and again for me in the businesses that don't succeed that we invest in. The first one is a lack of capacity to sell. So people tend to get really, really focused on either making or delivering a service and forget that they've actually got to go out there and sell it. If there's a product or service, you've got to do that. And I've seen that again and again and again. There was an example quite a few years ago now in South Yorkshire when I was doing deals. And it was an organisation that made theatrical costumes, and they made the most amazing theatrical costumes. They were just brilliant. We invested in them, and I went along about 3 months later into this warehouse, racks and racks and racks of these beautiful costumes. I asked about sales, I asked about how many they were generating. They hadn't made a single sale. They just focused on the product. They didn't even have merchant services. And that business failed because they just didn't have the capacity to sell. The other linked thing to that is no sales experience. So lots of us in the sector are shy about the cost and the price of our services. Some of that's about power play, so the relationships with local authorities, with big commissioners. I'm not picking on this one, it's something, it's more of a general comment. There tends to be a dynamic happening in that relationship that actually makes it hard sometimes for a small organisation to be forceful in saying, no, this is what it costs. This is actually what my business needs to do. The other one is poor marketing and communication. Just not having either the skills, the experience, the budget to be able to really communicate what you're trying to do and what you're trying to say. But the biggest single challenge is your customers can't pay, the people that should pay won't pay, or they just don't know about you. So you just cannot get out there and get to those people, and that connects to some of the earlier points. And that really is the biggest challenge that I see again and again and again. And it doesn't make sense to me. Peter touched on fair trade, touched on all those brands. There are people making conscious decisions day after day after day to buy social, fair trade, to buy fair. People think about that decision every day in the supermarket, but there's never been the ability to really connect. I think when most people get it, they really do. I know, the kind of the pub test or the anti-test. When I tell them what I do, at first they kind of scrunch their face. If I say social enterprise, they tend to go, do you mean? But when I explain it, they get interested, they want to know more, and I think that's a real challenge that we need to overcome. But how do we overcome that? Think about who pays and who knows, and who has money. And this is something I have to do on a fairly regular basis when I'm trying to attract new funds for us to invest. Who's got the money, who's exercised, who knows what we're trying to achieve. These are just some figures that I pulled out. Interestingly, Peter's figures were slightly different. I found about 5 different sets of figures on this stuff. What we're talking about is big numbers though. You know, we can all agree that these are big numbers. So the report that I was looking at said 900,000 VCC organisations, third sector organisations in the country. A lot of small, that disclaimer on there, they might be employing nobody, but they actually get it, at least they get it, and they're probably buying stuff. So there's 900,000 organisations to go at. Their income, apparently, is 44 billion. That's a big number. And 54% of its earnings, so some of it, they're earning themselves, so they've probably got more discretion on what they do with it. And they spend 42 billion. So there's 2 billion there to start with for us to run at and try and get. That's without getting at the other income. The numbers I looked at, which were less than the numbers Peter said, so let's go with my lower number, but bear in mind there's probably a higher number there. 890,000 people employed. So discretionary spend, average weekly discretionary spend in this country, £72.31 per week. So if we got access to that, 10% of that, of the 890k, that's £334 million a year to go at, and that's only 10% of the discretionary spend of the people that work in social enterprises. They start to be big numbers, it starts to make sense. So forgetting about the money and actually the big numbers out there that you can apply for, getting people to buy your products and services and getting at the people that you know get what you're up to is probably the best way forward. And then if you then come to an investor and say, I'm selling, that's the easiest deal in the world to do. They are the really easy deals to do where people are already selling a product or service. So the conclusion is, lots of money out there for you to apply for. It becomes a lot easier if you're selling, and actually you've got a huge market of people and a huge market of organisations that are really, really interested in get what you're trying to do anyway. And even just that number of 334 million, that's half of the social investment offers that were made in 2016. So, you maybe don't even need the investment. So, the answer is probably somewhere in between. What you do is you mix this stuff up and you try and use the right money at the right time, you sell as much as you can, and you try and move forward. And that's what our clients are really good at, and the successful ones, that's what they've been really good at doing. So I've got an example up here, Barnsley Community Build. Feature these because A, they were one of the first organisations I worked with at Key Fund. B, Dean in the middle is an ex-miner, had been unemployed for a long time, and I'm from the South Yorkshire coalfields, and just my affinity with what they were trying to do with miners really exciting to me personally. So I first met Dean and a guy called Steve Palmer who ran this organisation. They were just setting up, and they were setting up a all-female decorating service. So they set up, they identified a social issue, which was there were people in their communities that they were trying to work with, women in particular, who didn't feel comfortable with male tradespeople for various reasons that I'm sure I don't really need to go into. And they established this organisation and this particular service. And we had some grant money, so we put some grants in. It was start-up, they needed some kit and equipment, the social impact was clear, we invested into that. And from that grew a really big organisation. The next thing they came to us for, because we'd started to build a relationship, was they had a contract for based in Grindthorpe. At that point, there was one road in, one road out. Loads of problems that I've already mentioned. And all the walls have been pushed over the time. Front walls, most of the gardens have just been pushed over because the young people had nothing to do. They were bored, they just walked around causing havoc. So Barnsley Community Build got a contract from the local authority, pushed them on price, pushed them on social value, pushed them to say, this is the right thing to do. It isn't right for you to go out and outsource brickies from other parts of the country. We can actually get these young people to do it themselves. They're going to be less likely to kick them down and they've had to put them up. And actually, we're going to build tradespeople for the future and the skills and employment that you need. So we did a grant and loan offer to them, and that provided the working capital. They were in a slightly early stage growth. They got a bit of grant and a bit of loan to just help buy the bricks and pay the wages until the income started coming off the contract. So they were growing and starting to develop. About a year later, Steve came back to me and said, we want to buy a building. So they'd started to grow into that established phase. They'd secured other contracts. He took me to this site just on the edge of Barnsley Town Centre, big Victorian villas, beautiful when they were built, were now HMOs, lots of people living there, lots of social problems. Took me into one that had just been CPO'd and said to me, isn't it great, we can do amazing things here. As I looked up and saw sky through 4 floors, I did have my doubts about Steve's sanity. But actually, the more he talked, the more sense it made. It was a real house. It had walls that went this way and that way. The doors weren't quite flush. So for their trainees, this was a real building. It wasn't them going into a training centre and working on a perfectly aligned wall on a perfect flat floor. This was what they were going to experience in trade. So they did that. We invested in it. They did that one up. And that showed to the council they could do it. The council CPO'd some others. They did the same with those, so they've now got a block of about 4. What that's led to is the community around it, the people that own houses, have started to invest in their own properties. A little bit later, he came back for a loan to set up a community cafe because they'd started to pull people in and build a real community hub. They created office space for the other VCSE organisations, so they were selling to the right sector, people who understood what they were trying to achieve, and they were building a real strong organisation. And the last phase that they've just gone through is they started to think about housing because it was a major challenge. They were finding that a lot of their trainees had real housing issues. So they've started to actually take properties now from CPO and do them up using local trainees. And again, what they're finding is that same catalytic effect that they had on what's called Doncaster Road, where they took over and built their own bases, they're seeing the same thing happen in communities as local people are seeing local people doing work on their own buildings in those communities. So an example of an organisation that's grown and developed. And in that last part, what they've actually done is they've started to blend the money. So they went out and secured some lottery money and some Coalfields money and some debt from us, and they've put together a package themselves. So they've learned the value of using the right money at the right time, the way in which we used it, and they're doing it for us now, and they're actually moving forward on that basis and really starting to become a very sophisticated organisation using different ways of financing different parts of the business. So just a good example, hopefully, of how organisations can grow and about using that money in the right way at the right time. So thank you. Hopefully that hasn't been too dry. Money is a very dry subject, especially when you follow someone like Peter. Any questions? I'd be great, happy to answer, or I can take them at the break. Really up to you. Still silence, or everyone's asleep. Yeah, brilliant.
What about enterprises that are not even aimed at making money or ever likely to make profits, that are there basically to serve the community?
So I hope what's come across is I don't try and present social investment as the answer to everything. It's the answer to a very specific question. So if you have trading income and you need to use capital to enable you to do that, then that's exactly right for social investment. I very strongly believe there are a whole bunch of organisations doing work in communities that can never make money. I was trustee, treasurer and chair of an organisation that worked with survivors of sexual violence. I did that for 9 years. I spent 9 years trying to find income models that would work. There are bits you can do. So we rented out our car park because it was in the centre of Doncaster, and the solicitors would pay us money to use our car park. So we got on their social conscience and said they can pay us for it. We did contracts, but actually we always had to go to grant funds. That's okay. That's fine by me. I think there are things that are so important and that are about social net, catching the people that really need help. You can do social enterprise stuff with that group at some point, but I think the core services sometimes need grant funding. My argument would be the more people that we can move into an enterprising model, the more people that we can liberate from the grant funding circles, the more money we can direct to the things that really, really need it. Because I do think, and I spent 2 years out on secondment at the lottery, and I do think that there are people getting grant funding that don't actually need it, that could go a different way, and it would liberate them as an organisation. It would give them the ability, as Peter said, to go to their own safe and say, you know what, we don't have to go and ask the funder, do you mind if I use a bit of this? They can actually do it. So I think it's just important that those organisations that have this potential will move them along, so it frees up that precious grant money for those things that can't. Does that? Great.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Matt. Lots of food for thought there, I think, and some really inspiring case studies and examples. What we'd like you to do now, and you'll get a reward at the end of it, because we've got a nice lunch coming at 12:30, but what we'd like you to do now is, well, first of all, what I'd like to get out of today is to set up some kind of network made up of the people in this room and some people who couldn't make it today as well, so we can start building this zone and start thinking about the things that we need to do in order to nurture social enterprise in the area, but not just social enterprise. We need to nurture all the small independent traders and the voluntary groups and the community groups and the people out in communities who aren't actually part of any group yet. They're just there with some ideas and they need to be linked up into that. So we've got some questions for you, which we'd like you to consider and discuss around your tables and scribble down on the flip chart paper with the pens and tuck into the sweets and everything. There's two questions. What conditions do we need to nurture a resilient social economy? So what are the things that we need in place, or the things that we need to develop that can build on the stuff that we've already got on? We've got the beginnings of something here, so how can we develop all that? And then the flip side of that obviously is they're the conditions, these are the things that we need. What can you and your organisations and anyone else you know, what can they bring to the party? What can they contribute to that process? So get talking, get discussing and get writing down, and then we'll have a look at what's been said and we'll pull that all together at a future date and try and bring you all back together again and get things moving.